You're tuned in to the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Hello, Bear Down Believers, and welcome into the show. I'm your host, Matt Reynoldsson. Happy midweek and happy week 2 of Arizona fall football camp. We got a lot to talk about from what I saw on the practice fields today, some takeaways from the past few days of practice, as well as some injury news on the Wildcats front. Plus, we'll talk about Brent Brennan's appearance on the Jim Rome Show, a national stage to talk about his program yesterday on the national airwaves. Arizona coming in at number 21 in the preseason USA Today coaches poll. Plus, a little more controversy going on in Colorado as well. We'll check in on the Buffalo's football program and some recent allegations about what Deion Sanders is doing up there in that program. Plus, the ASU quarterback situation just up I-10 seems to have taken an interesting turn. I'll give my thoughts on all that and more. Before we get to the content of our podcast today, I want to remind you to please subscribe to Bleav in Arizona on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. And the video versions will all be available over on my YouTube at Matt_Reynoldsson. That's Bleav in Arizona. Definitely appreciate you being here as one of our loyal listeners. All right, let's talk a little bit about practice today. And the headliner, early on at least in practice, was number 4 back in the fold of individual work. Tetairoa McMillan with the pads on, moving pretty well, doing individual drills with his teammates, but still no teamwork for T-Mac. So good news and bad news on that front. But, Dino Babers kind of tipped his hand a little bit last week. Arizona's offensive coordinator basically saying if they could choose to have Tetairoa McMillan back for this year, have T-Mac in the fold, ready to contribute for the season, not transferring, not going to the NFL draft. If they could have made that decision when they got here, knowing with the caveat that he would miss all of fall camp, if that was the case, that Dino Babers would have taken that trade-off. Now, it seems like T-Mac is pretty close to coming back, but I'm under the impression that this coaching staff is in no rush to get him back on the field. This is a preseason first-team All-American talent. This is a preseason guy who is probably projected to be mid-first round of the NFL draft. With the value that wide receivers place now, he could even work himself into a top 10 pick. So this is a guy that's arguably the second most important player on your team outside of quarterback Noah Fifita. And he already has that rapport and those reps with Fifita. He also already has rapport and reps with the guy who's emerging as the top contender to be the backup quarterback in Braden Dorman. So having the rapport, having the timing, having everything going with those guys means that they don't need to rush T-Mac back at all. T-Mac will be ready to go when they need him to be ready to go. And that starts on August 31st against New Mexico. Now, do I see a scenario where he's back on the field for team activities within the next week? Yeah, I do. I think he's fairly close. I think if you asked him, he would make the decision that he wants to be out there with his teammates. His foot feels good coming off of off-season surgery. He's ready to go. But as of right now, T-Mac's still kind of slowly working his way back. And I think that gives a little bit of a glimpse as to how the coaches are handling all injuries in fall camp, minor and major. So far, as far as this week goes, the only major injury that we've seen is Michael Wooten, a backup offensive lineman transfer from Oregon. And he seems like he went down, I believe it was yesterday's practice, went down late in practice, and today he was in street clothes. So that's maybe a little concerning from a depth standpoint on the offensive line, but I don't think it tips the staff's hand at all as to what his long-term prospects are. The staff has been very careful with this offensive line, holding guys out for minor injuries, getting other guys worked in, because let's face it, there's not really that much proven depth on Arizona's offensive line. So the more you can develop that depth through fall camp, the better off you'll be in the regular season when injuries do indeed strike. We've seen a lot of guys miss time so far in fall camp from this starting offensive line group. Now, seems to me like Jonas Avenaya has really been available most of the time at right tackle. So you have your right tackle locked down. he's Arizona's best pro prospect on the offensive line. So nice to kind of see him continue to work out there and not really miss any time, not be nicked and bruised at all, just kind of going with all of it and continuing to do his job he does so well out there at right tackle. So Savania seems set. But Leif Magnuson at right guard has missed quite a bit of time. Josh Baker has missed time here and there at center. Left guard Wendell Moe has yet to go through team reps at all during fall camp. So that's concerning for an all-conference performer from last year, returning all Pac-12 performer. But we talked to him today, and he said that if there was a game Saturday, he would push through it and be ready to go. But just that he's been dealing with a lot of soft tissue injuries there. And now we're seeing someone emerge at left tackle that we told you about a little while ago. Rhino Tapa'atotai is really emerging as that guy at left tackle. We got a chance to talk to the redshirt freshman for the first time today. He spent last year watching from the sidelines as Jordan Morgan locked down the spot at left tackle for Arizona and really became that stud, that anchor of the offensive line, and was eventually drafted in the first round by the Green Bay Packers. But I see Rhino as having a very different mentality than Jordan Morgan, and I think that could create a very good situation at left tackle for the Arizona Wildcats. Let me explain. Jordan Morgan, as is showing now in Packers camp, where he's taking most of the starting reps at right guard, Jordan Morgan was just a damn good offensive lineman. I mean, that is what he showed himself to be, especially in his recovery from an ACL injury the year before last. He is just a solid offensive lineman with the measurables to play any of the 5 spots on the offensive line. I used to cover the Green Bay Packers. I know that's what the Packers look for when they draft guys. So they didn't draft Jordan Morgan as a left tackle. They drafted him as a first-round offensive line talent. And so far, their use of him, their development of him has really spoken to that and spoken to exactly what they want out of him and how he can be a help to the entire Packers offensive line. I think Rhino's a different player than that. I think Rhino carries a different demeanor. I think he is relentlessly aggressive. He's loud. He's forward. And he has a really good anecdote from today about how he got his nickname Rhino in Pop Warner football.
So that's a nickname. My first name is Xiaoxi. I got that name when I was playing Pop Warner Little League football. Grew a big reputation where I'm from. And it just stuck with me as I traveled around the country. So, yeah. I say my style is just relentless. You know, it's my name, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory. Rhino, you know, I just go out there, you know, mess up. Hey, I'm going to be back next play. You know, I'm going to be here all day. I ain't getting off the field. So, yeah, that's basically it.
I mean, you could see it from his press conference there. He just comes across as confident, comes across as a guy that would be on the field and be one of those players that has just a nasty streak to him. I think that's the attitude you have to have for a left tackle in college football, especially when you're protecting the blind side of an asset as valuable as Noah Fifita, who's perhaps the most important quarterback in the Big 12. Not saying best, I'm saying most important, because I think that Arizona has the highest prospects of any of the teams that have, you know, really strong quarterback play. I would consider maybe the other 2 strong quarterbacks to be Shedeur Sanders at Colorado and Jalen Daniels at Kansas. And I think Arizona has a higher ceiling than both of those teams. You could say that Cam Rising for Utah is supremely important, but I think Utah's roster has gotten to a point where it elevates itself, and Cam Rising is more of a complementary piece, whereas Noah Fifita is the engine that really makes the Arizona Wildcats go. So protecting him, especially from the blind side of a conference with some sneaky good pass rushers, could be very, very important to the success of this Arizona season. And I think Rhino carries the perfect demeanor to be able to do that. All right, let's talk about Arizona football on the national stage. Brent Brennan went on the Jim Rome show yesterday and just had a lot of good things to say on the national stage with that radio show. You know, Jim Rome has been a staple on CBS Sports Radio for a very long time, and obviously has created a media empire in and of himself. A very unique personality and fun to listen to, and certainly has a lot of followers. So for Arizona to have the spotlight to their program on that stage, I think is super impressive. And I think Jim Rome and having that stage to speak on the program is something that Brent Brennan really relished the opportunity to do. His comments made it seem like he was ready to highlight the amazing things that this program has to offer right now. He said in his interview, this team is special. He likes the way that it's a player led culture and that it's a culture led program. This is not about the X's and O's of the Jimmies and Joes. It's about how Arizona football is establishing a foundation, a cultural foundation for the years moving ahead in his program. And when you look at other coaching changes around the country, so many coaches need to come in and impart their style or impart their culture or change so many things, do a roster overhaul, do a personalities overhaul. But Brennan stepped in, and Brennan was ready to take on the culture of this team, to take on the family atmosphere of Arizona football, to put his arms around and embrace the Polynesian culture that extends throughout the U of A program and all these players that are fierce warriors, but also family first and faith forward. And I think we've asked and talked to so many people during preseason camp so far about the Polynesian culture of Arizona football. And I think that that's what really permeates the entirety of this program. And I think we see it first and foremost with the starting quarterback, Noah Fafita. But also look how Brent Brennan has echoed that culture. You know, Arizona's players all wore the lays to Big 12 media days. It's something that they are going to reinforce and reinforce and reinforce that this is a family first culture and a player first culture. And I think Brent Brennan has done a great job stepping into that. He had a great anecdote with Rome about when Fafita and McMillan and all the other players announced they're coming back for the 2024 season. If you remember, it was the Arizona versus UCLA basketball game at McHale on a Saturday in January. And it was so impressive to see that, you know, the crowd swell of support and the excitement around Arizona football at a basketball game between two of the most storied rivals in the Pac-12. It ended up being a double-digit Arizona basketball comeback, but still the highlight of the day was Fafita and McMillan announcing they're coming back. And Brennan obviously knew this before that happened, but they were waiting in the tunnel to come out during a timeout, to come out and bring in the crowd on this and juice the McHale crowd and get them excited for football. And Brennan turned to Noah Fafita and he said, you know, this is about you guys choosing to come back. This is about you returning and you taking ownership of this program and you taking ownership of this family. And I want you to have that spotlight, so I don't want to lead you out. And Fafita turned back to him and he said, no, coach, I want you to lead us out onto the court, because this is not about us announcing that we're coming back to Arizona football. This is about us announcing we're coming back to do it with you. What a huge, huge endorsement for Brent Brennan and what he brings to this program and what he brings as a leader, as a culture setter, as a football mind, as someone who deeply cares about his roots within the Arizona football program. Whether that goes back to his connection with Dick Tomey, or if that goes back to his wife graduating from the U of A, or so many deep connections that he has to the University of Arizona. He wants to be here a long time. He's in it for the Block A, and that is so refreshing to see and so encouraging to see for the long-term future of this football program. And to know the program changing leaders on this roster know that and want him here, not just for this year, not just to lead them in this all-important season of 2024, but to lead this program beyond that is a huge, huge endorsement. So Brent Brennan recapping that little anecdote on the Jim Rome show, and certainly exciting to hear and inspiring to hear how together this team is already, still with 3 weeks to go before the first football game. All right, let's talk preseason rankings. The first official preseason rankings are out, and Arizona comes in at Number 21 in the preseason poll, which is, I'm a big junkie for the way too early preseason polls that come out in January, come out in spring, come out in the middle of summer. So I pour through all of those. 21 seems pretty much on track with where most people had Arizona coming into the summer. However, I think people were maybe less bullish on Arizona coming out of spring and didn't really pay attention to what the Wildcats added in that post-spring transfer portal period. Raymella Murphy, the wide receiver from Old Dominion, is going to play a huge part in this team. The defensive line transfers they added that weren't here for spring ball are going to add to the depth of one of the few position groups with actual question marks on this team. And remember, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, who very well might be Arizona's starting running back, was not on the spring roster, and Arizona had a late add to him after he had an academic issue, went to Ole Miss, committed to Ole Miss, and then Ole Miss couldn't take him and came back to Arizona. Regardless, number one in the running back room is now an Arizona Wildcat. So I think these pieces that Arizona added are maybe worthy of a little more attention than the national media paid them coming out of spring ball, because the story coming out of winter was, how many guys would the Wildcats lose? The answer was not that many. A couple starters in Jonah Coleman and Ephesians Prysock to Washington, but really, the running back room, the running back stable is deep now, probably almost as deep as it was in last year's team that ran the ball extremely effectively. The defensive line room lost a couple guys to transfer, but they've built through this. They've built a lot of guys that can get upfield and wreak havoc and free things up for the linebackers. The inside linebacker room is as good as it was before before the spring season. And the defensive back room is probably one of the best in the nation. So I think there's a lot of reasons to be bullish on Arizona. Now let's look at where the other Big 12 teams are ranked. There are 3 Big 12 teams ranked above Arizona, 5 overall Big 12 teams ranked in the top 25. Utah leads the pack at number 13. Kansas State at number 17. Oklahoma State at number 18. Of course, Arizona at 21. And Kansas at number 24. Now, I have a little qualm with Arizona being behind a couple teams that aren't from the Big 12. And they mainly reside in the southeastern part of the country. Let's start off with the team directly ahead of Arizona, and that's Texas A&M. I think Mike Elko is going to be a great coach for the Aggies. I think he's the type of guy, the type of culture setter coming in from Duke that can turn around a program that has, for recent years, been a lot of high expectations, high talent, massively underachieving. That being said, they had a mass exodus in the transfer portal. And while the talent is still there, I don't know if in year one of Mike Elko at Texas A&M, can they be a top 25 program, especially with a rugged schedule in the SEC. And frankly, I'd take Arizona above Texas A&M on a neutral field right now. I think the weapons Arizona has coming back, the headliners coming back to this team, arguably its 3 best players in Noah Fafita, Tedero McMillan, and Jacob Manu, as well as maybe its 4th best player in Takario Davis from a pro prospect standpoint. They're all back. I mean, the offensive line is back. You've got the defensive back room returning to Arizona. I think that this team on paper today, in a carryover from last year, is better than Texas A&M. Oklahoma also above Arizona. That's tough for me because this is essentially very similar to the Oklahoma team that Arizona just beat in the Alamo Bowl. So we've seen the battle on a neutral field. We've seen the battle really not that neutral. I mean, San Antonio is a shadow of OU territory, down there in Texas. A lot of Oklahoma alums that live in southern Texas. So some parts of that were a road game for Arizona, especially the travel distance. But Arizona beat OU on a neutral field just a few months ago. So, maybe I'm a little biased, but I think I would have Arizona over Oklahoma at this stage. LSU, I don't understand the hype at all. LSU is coming in 12th after losing a ton to the NFL draft, after losing the Heisman winner in Jaden Daniels, after losing a top 5 wide receiver pick, or top 6 wide receiver pick in Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas going to the Jaguars in the NFL draft. I think they lose a ton on the offensive side of the ball, and I'm not so sure Nussmeier can just step in at the QB position and have some of the same success that Daniels did last year. I know they're expecting to be better on defense, but that was a putrid defense last year. I think it's a lot of roll the dice and hope for LSU as far as this year goes. And then being at number 12 in preseason is massively high. I also think Miami at number 19 is coming in a little overrated to this year. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm bullish on where Miami is this year. I think Cam Ward is a heck of a quarterback coming in to take over the spot left by Tyler Van Dyke from last year. But, I mean, have they proven anything on the field? I mean, they had a disappointing season last year, complete with one of the worst losses you will ever see, where Mario Cristobal completely mismanaged the clock in a loss to Georgia Tech, in which the Hurricanes could have won by just taking a knee, ended up fumbling, and ended up losing the game on one of the final plays. But I think that I think that Miami is going to be a very good team, going to have very good athletes on the field. But Noah Fafita was a better quarterback than Cam Ward last year. So I think Arizona, coming into this year with the schedule they have, should be ranked higher and have better prospects than Miami. So I just listed 4 teams that I think maybe Arizona should probably take a look at being ahead of. I think they're underrated, but not by much. And I think that 16 to 17 spot in the preseason rankings would be just right for Arizona. But you know what? We wouldn't be local media if we weren't complaining about our team that we cover being a little bit underranked. So that's, I think, what we'll see for a lot of this year. And we'll see if Arizona can earn some respect by potentially going on the road and getting 2 top 20 wins in September. I think if that happens, and if Arizona, by some stretch of the imagination, gets through September at 4-0, we could be looking at a top 10 Arizona Wildcats team, which is about where they finished last year's rankings at. Taking a look around the Big 12, I want to discuss what's going on at Colorado, because there was an Athlon Sports article that came out over the weekend that detailed allegations of bullying and harassment within the Buffalo's football program. According to a former player, it was like a real-life Grand Theft Auto, which is how he described it to Athlon, with drugs, money, and guns floating around the locker room, a harassment culture, a culture of players fighting each other and striving for coaches' attention. And some of that stands to reason that it would be reflective of the program's culture of push the non-performers out and pull new guys in en masse every single year. So you can take a look at the article over on my Twitter at Matt_Reynoldson. And while you're there, you can take a look under the replies at all the Colorado fans coming after me. So this message is not for those Colorado fans who couldn't define libel to you and probably haven't opened a textbook since their sophomore year of high school. My message is to the Colorado fans that are not that vocal minority and that do have real concerns around the Buffalo's football program and the culture of transactionalism within Deion Sanders' program. Does it bother you at all that the Buffaloes are never represented by the Buffalo anymore? That it's not represented by the black and gold, or what Rick George, the athletic director, has worked so hard to establish about the University of Colorado? Does it bother you that it's all about Prime? Does it bother you that he doesn't want to go to in-home visits for recruits and said recruits would rather see my house? Does it bother you that you're pulling in very small high school recruiting classes, which has been proven time and time again, year in and year over, about the best way to develop guys on the offensive and defensive line? Does it bother you at all that last year you finished the season losing 8 of your final 9 football games of the season, and that in crunch time against teams like Arizona and Stanford, you failed to execute the little things? And does it bother you that the player face of your program is more interested in his watch and what he can get from endorsement deals, his music career, and his NFL draft status than playing for the Buffalo on his helmet? I'm wondering if it bothers you, because I know what Colorado's football history is. And when I was growing up, it was a strong one. It was a proud program that would, get in your face and pick fights, but was about more than just individual players and individual guys. We've seen Deion Sanders build a program at Jackson State, but did he really? Or did he overwhelm them with talent and the ability to out-scheme them from a football sense? Does he have any idea how to build a Power 5 program? Is he just transactional? Is it my way or the highway? And does that bother you, real longtime Colorado football fans that aren't ready for this to just be a flash in the pan and want to see Deion Sanders, one of the greatest football players of all time, actually build your program into something of relevance? Trust me, I know in college football, there is nothing more detrimental than irrelevance. And I think a lot of real Colorado fans are worried about that taking place if Deion Sanders chooses to leave. Now, if he adjusts his approach and takes it more as I'm doing this for the University of Colorado, that's a different conversation. But right now, it seems to be a lot like Deion and a lot like an unfortunate culture that's taking place in this locker room that may, I think, lead to another disappointing season in Boulder. So ask yourself, real Colorado fans, is this what you want moving forward? And do you want the vocal minority to be the gatekeepers of your program on social media? Because if Deion Sanders leaves, those guys, they'll be gone just as fast. Continuing a look around the Big 12, I don't think a culture program exists at Arizona State. Kenny Dillingham is the youngest head coach in college football and seems to have guys that want to play for him, seems to be very good with the media, very optimistic, very positive, a developmental coach. However, last year, the issue for the Sun Devils was not culture. It was the quarterback position. And now the quarterback position seems to be an even bigger issue, which I know my U of A listeners will not be shedding a tear over what's going on at the quarterback position up at ASU. Sam Leavitt was brought in as a transfer from Michigan State to be the starting quarterback. You know, a guy with a live arm, guy that had seen snaps for Michigan State last year, was seen to be a very strong, growing prospect, everything like that. Well, reports surfaced out of Sun Devil camp this past week that he had been moved down to running with the twos, which means his backup was now running with the ones. Who's that backup? College football journeyman and, by all accounts, turnover machine, Jeff Sims. Look, I'm a Nebraska grad. I watch the Huskers pretty much every week, and you can see, by my diploma right here that I am a proud Nebraska grad. Jeff Sims was Nebraska's starting quarterback at the beginning of last year. And to give Jeff Sims maybe a little more credit than most Husker fans would, he had a pretty poor wide receiving core to work with and a bunch of injuries, massive injuries in both the offensive line and the running back room, as well as some tight ends that weren't as proven and were nicked up all year. It was a tough offensive situation in a brand new offensive system for Jeff Sims to get used to. That being said, the guy was a turnover machine last year. He couldn't handle snaps. He would fumble at inopportune times, couldn't finish drives, was a guy that locked in on his first read in the passing game. And even with that huge, strong arm and great 6'4" frame, would bullet passes straight into defenders' hands. The awareness is not where you want as a starting quarterback at the Power 5 level. And I think Arizona State is maybe falling in love with traits here. Dillingham seeing a guy that can make all the practice throws, can stand in the pocket, is fast, can be electric in the running game, but you don't really get rid of the turnover bug. He had that at Georgia Tech, which a lot of Nebraska fans were concerned about last year coming in because this was their only option at starting quarterback. Nebraska ended up starting 3 different quarterbacks last year in different games, and all 3 had major turnover issues. But it was all started by Jeff Sims. And I'll never forget when I was watching Nebraska play Purdue at the end of October last year after Sims had lost his starting job. The starting quarterback, Heinrich Haarberg, got hurt, and Sims came in for a 3rd and short or 4th and short play, needing to gain 1 yard and move the chains. What he did was he ran the option the wrong direction, fell backwards when the Purdue defenders converged on him, and fumbled the ball behind his head, leading to a Purdue scoop and score. I don't know if it's just the bright lights of Nebraska or if it's the bright lights of college football altogether, but when it comes to performance basis, Jeff Sims has massive turnover issues. And if you're an ASU fan, I would hope that Jeff Sims is not my starting quarterback come the first game of the season, because the turnover issues don't just go away. And if ASU deals with that again all this year, just like they did from the quarterback position last year, it's going to be a long season up in Tempe. I would hope that Sam Leavitt wins the starting quarterback job for the Sun Devils if I'm a Sun Devil fan. But certainly looks like Jeff Sims has the inside track this year at ASU, and that is not a very good thing for the Sun Devils. All right, as we wrap things up here on the Bleav in Arizona podcast, want to do something we do every show. That's the Bear Down Rundown, telling you what else is going on in Arizona athletics. And today I want to talk a little bit about the Wildcat volleyball team on the heels of the news that 5th-year senior outside hitter Jalen Hodge was named to the preseason All Big 12 team. Last year, she totaled 309 kills, averaged 2.73 kills per set to rank third on the team. She recorded 10 or more kills in 16 matches, tallying 5 double-doubles. Now, she's a player that can come back and really be a leader on this Arizona Wildcats team in another year under Sharita Stubbs. And it feels like at the end of last season, Arizona Volleyball was sort of starting to turn a corner, won a couple big home matches in a row, didn't maybe have the best finish, but this is a team that is maybe a little bit overdue to refine some of that success they found under Dave Rubio in the past, and they can do it this year by making a splash in the non-conference before they get into that grueling Big 12 schedule, starting the conference season at national powerhouse Baylor early on in the year. Now, starting off this season, they start with a home tournament against it at the Cactus Classic, facing off against Boise State and VCU, as well as Tennessee State in a 3-day stretch at McHale Center. And I think that this team can really get a lot of confidence from a start like that. It's a manageable non-conference schedule, and it's a team that brings back a lot of experience, a good recruiting class, and ladies that can really turn the corner for this program and get it back to being a very strong contender in the Big 12. And if they have an opportunity to do that and have an opportunity to build some wins in the non-conference, who knows what comes of conference play. If Arizona has a very good non-conference season, even going 500 in Big 12 play would probably get them into the NCAA tournament, which we have learned anything can happen on that stage. And it'd certainly be nice to see Arizona Volleyball back on that stage in the postseason, because it really is an epic tournament and the NCAA volleyball tournament every fall. All right, that'll do it for this edition of the Bleav in Arizona podcast. Reminder to please subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Bleav.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. And check out the video version on my YouTube page at Matt_Reynoldson. Thanks so much for listening once again. We'll be back on Friday before the Wildcats night practice over at Arizona Stadium. Until then, have a great week. We'll see you next time.